It's Convolution Reverb. Hello and welcome, or welcome back if you've been here before, somehow. Got another sound design video for you. Convolution Reverb is a type of reverb where instead of using digital algorithms to calculate your space, it uses samples of recorded audio as impulse responses and mixes those impulse responses with your input signal or your instrument. This type of reverb is frequency specific, which means if you have matching frequencies in both your convolution sample and in your input signal, those frequencies are going to be amplified. They're going to be louder than the others, which means sometimes your convolution reverb can act as a bit of an exciter, depending on how you use it. The point of using samples in convolution reverbs is to better simulate an actual physical space. Let's say you wanted to have the sound of a piano in a certain church. There may be a sample of that church. Or let's say you wanted it in the middle of a park. You could have a sample of a piano in the middle of a park if you wanted to. But I'm a depraved amateur sound designer, which means I'm not going to use convolution reverb in that way. I'm not going to use it the way it's supposed to be used. I'm going to do different things with it. I'm going to get weird with it. Let's do it. Now, a cool thing about convolution reverb plugins like the one that I'm using here, Fog Convolver 2, is that you can add your own samples to it. At least I believe most convolution reverb plugins allow you to do that. But you can add your own samples in here, and they don't have to be samples of recorded spaces. They don't have to be samples of reverbs. They could be samples of anything. You could have samples of you speaking. You could have samples of other instruments. You could have samples of ambience. You could have samples of claps. You could have samples of all sorts of different things. It doesn't matter what the sample is, you can add whatever sample you want. Now what's happening is that my dry sound is being enhanced by the frequency content of this impulse response. Now this sample is actually a very noisy FM sample, and you can hear the FM elements in it somewhat, so it doesn't sound bigger necessarily, but it's definitely transforming the sound in interesting and different ways. Now, as I said before, you can use any sample you want. Whatever effects are on that sample will also change your sound. Let's say you wanted some fake guitar amp type sound or some spring reverb type sound. You could throw that sample in there and get that kind of sound. You can add samples of other instruments to your sound, like this one. But for other sounds, like say flowing water or crickets or birds, something else happens to your sound. Now here, the sample of crickets that I'm using hasn't totally changed my piano sound, but it does add a little bit of ringing to certain frequencies. That's because of the crickets chirping is very, very narrow to certain frequencies. I've actually also tuned the pitch of the impulse response down a bit so that it can match what I'm playing. I'm using Fog Convolver for a lot of the stuff in this video, and this is a little bit different from some of the other convolution reverb plugins out there for a couple reasons. You can have two impulse responses, and you can set them to be single, so it's just the first one. A serial mix, so it goes from one into the other. Parallel mix, so it's the two samples separately. You can have a parallel mix, so that instead of separate, they cross over. And then true stereo. You can also do things like change the pitch of whatever sample you're using for your impulse response. And this can do something interesting. Watch this. If I increase the pitch here, you can notice that it's getting louder. But if I bring it down, it gets quieter. Now, what changing the pitch actually does is it's going to, change the actual pitch of the sample that you're using, which is going to shift the frequencies accordingly as well. So that can also change the timbre of whatever sound that you're using. So it's a bit useful. So what's actually happening here is what I mentioned before with the frequencies that are matching, they're going to be amplified louder. The actual cricket chirping corresponds to roughly around a C. So anytime I play a C, you're going to hear anything that's close to a C be louder than the other notes here. By the way, I've been listening to this half dry, half wet. Let's hear it fully wet. So it doesn't really sound like crickets anymore. It sounds like a little bit of a different sound because we're still getting the piano going through and exciting the signal. One thing you may have also noticed just a little bit while I played there was that you can actually shape your sound a little bit. If there's any element to the sample that you're using for your impulse response that is a little bit rhythmic, or it has some kind of pattern or some shape to it, you can use that to your advantage, especially if it's 100% wet. Now there is something else to keep in mind with convolution reverb, at least with Fog Convolver. The sample is going to play from beginning to end, whatever that beginning is and whatever that end is. In this, I can set my start and end points of the sample. But if I have a sound that isn't just a one shot, which will trigger each time these little peaks are showing here, right? You can hear that here. If I were to sustain this out, it's not going to keep repeating, so you can't really get sequence sounds out of this unless you have a really long sample. But that doesn't mean you still can't get interesting things out of it. And there you have it. See? Nothing scary. It's just another tool. It's a weird tool. Can come up with some weird sounds, but we like weird. You like weird. And now I leave it to you to go out there and get creative. Now go. Get creative. I'll see you next time, whenever that is. Bye.